politically correct people because they talked with an authority of ignorance.
It's sorry, I've lost my trail of thought. I was going to
misconduct. Can you believe it?
I was going to say and I don't even know how that could actually be defended in court either. How that could be won in court, overruled in court. Was it overruled? It wasn't overruled.
The appeal was upheld.
I don't even know how that can happen.
It's because it's foisting your religious beliefs on a vulnerable person. So they use these buzzwords like vulnerable, like foisting, but what they don't take into account is, first of all, it's not a matter of being vulnerable and not resisting. Just because the person was vulnerable is why the nurse was trying to support them. Now, she made an emotional decision, and perhaps it wasn't the wisest of decisions, but it was done with the best heart. And something like that, where there is no malicious intent, one would have thought that perhaps a little bit of education and teaching on how to respond in such a difficult time, because you do get attached to patients you're looking after. I remember being really upset when a patient died in my arms once, because I've been looking after him. And you might not make the most logical decision, but her intent was to help and comfort.
I think I think there's going to be a point. What's going to happen here is there's going to be a line that's going to be crossed, or there's going to be a straw. There's going to be one straw too many on the camel's back, and we're already beginning to see, and we're seeing it among particularly what you would call the English thugs, I suppose.
You see, but those are thugs. They're not respectable.
I know, but they're the face. They're almost the face of this resistance of pushing back and about identity and things like this. And in some ways, Tommy Robinson almost became the face of that. But he wasn't preaching in some ways anything different to what Douglas Murray does. Just Douglas Murray does he's far more articulate in how he actually delivers that message.
One is education, the other one is inciting.
I think how he approached it, and look, don't really have a lot of respect for Tommy Robinson, but you still got to treat him the same way as everybody else. And all it does is when you stick him in prison after one day and things like that, all it is doing is adding more fuel to the fire, because there's a lot of people who would have been at one time very moderate in terms of their beliefs, are having to choose either one side of the fence or the other, and they're moving towards the right. And it's probably one of the reasons why Brexit actually really happened, because there was a lot of people who just didn't want immigration the way it was going. And maybe that wasn't the main that was the main reason actually why it was one. And there's a lot of people moving to the other side because there is a loss of identity. There's not one country you can go to where you can't actually be free to actually practice Christianity without any sort of repercussions at the moment. Openly, if that's what you want to do. There's no safe haven. People talk about safe spaces. There's no safe space.
Wearing a cross. People can't wear crosses on their uniforms anymore.
Really? You can't wear a cross on you. Why is that?
Nurses, air stewardesses are not allowed to.
Yeah, it's in some ways healing. In some ways, from nurses came from the nuns and things like this.
Ludicrous. And you see, talk about people like Tommy Robinson and these thugs. That will never succeed.
No,
because it's not a faith. It's not a moral, defined, boundaried, good for you way of life, such as religion, which has been carefully thought over thousands of years. And the only resistance to Islam is Christianity, and that's the origin of the Crusades.
But the thing is, we're all sorry.
Spain. You see, Spain was invaded by the Muslims, and the only thing that saved the Spanish was their Catholic religion, their staunch Catholic religion. And that's how they put them out. And yet, even so, South Spain is full of Islamic insignias. So that's the only thing that can stand in the way is another religion. And of course, in the West, that's not going to happen because people are increasingly self-obsessed, and And self-obsession atomizes any kind of structure, including religion, culture, moral ethics. And that's why people are increasingly unhappy.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I lost what I was going to say there. I had it on the tip of my
Tommy
tongue.
Robinson. You see, Tommy Robinson has an advantage because he's in the public eye. He can rebirth himself. He can become far more moderate and principle-based and faith-based if he's clever enough.
Well, the thing is, he's actually quite. I would say he's actually quite untrained to be in the media, because the media seem to control him. They shut him down when he's about to speak. They never let him finish a sentence and things like that. And he's not articulate enough or smart enough to be able to come back on that. Whereas you watch Douglas Murray, he does get given that time to be able to articulate his message, to actually get the whole message across.
Respect intellectuals.
Because he is. I mean, he went to Eton. I think he even went to Oxford, or I believe. I'm not sure, but albeit that was on a music degree or something. But Tommy Robinson comes across as a hack in some ways. He comes across as uneducated. He comes across as racist. He comes across, but they're not. The message is not any different, but the way the message is being presented, and also the presenters have got no qualms about shutting him down at every opportunity to be able to do so before he even gets out there. So it's a level of skill in terms of speaking to the media, but it's also a time of his delivery as well. And I don't think he's done himself any favours. I think he walked away from, I think it was the English Defence League or whatever it was. He walked away from them because they became too racist for him. But if he actually... and the thing is, you've got to almost give it to him, because he hasn't just talked about Islam in a negative way. He's actually gone and read the Quran to actually back up his belief system and his principles.
Which is, by the way, more than a lot of Muslims do.
Yes. So he's actually gone and researched it. He's gone and he's formed his opinion. He's formed his opinion on that. And but again, Douglas Murray, as I said, is far more articulate in doing so. But if you actually look at, anywhere in Europe now, there's not one place right now that someone could actually go and practice safely without any consequences. I mean, bearing in mind that the Pilgrims went over to America and things like that, so they could actually live the life they wanted to be able to. Even in some ways, you almost got to admire the Amish. Because the thing is, they've taken themselves off the grid, they live the way they want to do, and nobody actually bothers them. And I bet they're far happier in their way of life than many people are right now, because there's constant conflict. I mean, there's always been conflict through thousands of years. But the thing is, people were fighting for a purpose of how they wanted to live, and it's almost as though we are just, I'm not saying we, I'm saying Christianity is being pushed to the side until it won't be there any longer. And I think it needs someone who's strong enough to actually come in and actually, in some ways, do a Donald Trump and actually, shake it and shake it up and not be politically correct and not be doing that.
Well, chaos.
No, not that I'm a great fan of Donald either.
Chaos is the best time to achieve major change. And right now we have political chaos because people don't trust any of the politicians, and quite rightly so. As we've said, the country is being run by the civil service. It's nothing to do with politicians. Their only job is to get re-elected. And the proof of the pudding is the first time that the government was meant to achieve anything was Brexit, and they failed miserably, and they still can't get elected.
And you know something? I mean, we got the European elections here on Thursday, I believe, which is tomorrow. And it looks like, this is what is being suggested, that the Brexit Party, who was only formed 2 months ago, I think it was, is actually going to sweep it, because there's no trust in the Tories. I think they're actually fifth, in the polls. There's no trust in Labour. There's no trust in any of the other parties. And the Brexit Party, the Change Party, people have banned, they walked away from their party and they formed a new party. They've made no impact at all. And the Brexit Party people are beginning to take notice of that.
You see, the thing, and also Boris Johnson, he's much more of a character actor, really. And that's why Boris Johnson is much more of a character actor. He's not a film star. because ultimately people know that he's entirely... Well, the only good thing about him is that he's pretty open about being self-motivated and self-obsessed. But also people know that he hasn't done very well in his appointments, his political appointments.
Oh, I didn't think he was a bad mayor.
And
overall,
okay, I mean,
if you actually compare him to Sadiq
well,
Khan,
well, indeed. I mean, you can't compare dreadful to bad.
Yeah, he's shockingly bad.
But
the thing is, before him, Ken Livingstone.
He's known to not really get prepared very well for things. So I'm not sure he's put himself in the best light to be Prime Minister. He's certainly someone who people are very interested to hear and listen to. But whether they would trust him to have the top job and consistently provide results and see things through, I think it's a hard one. And as I've said before, it may be that his own ego to leave a legacy of being the greatest leader could just about pull him through in a surprise, but you never know.
Did you know? I suppose he's you remind you a little about Winston Churchill, because remember, I mean, we consider Winston Churchill in the country to be one of the greatest Britons of all time, but in fact, actually, he was only really a Great Britain, a great British subject when he was actually Prime Minister during the Second World War, when everyone was looking to negotiate with Hitler, and he actually sort of said, "No, we will fight. We will fight them." And the thing is, it was that bulldog type spirit, I suppose, that gave him that legacy. But the rest of the time, he was actually he wasn't a great peacetime Prime Minister. He was a great wartime Prime Minister, because that's what suited the role at the time. And in some ways, Boris Johnson is in some ways almost like in a similar mould. They're great to go and have a drink with, and you could have fun with them, but would you really want to go, would you really want to put, if you're going to invest in him, would you want to invest in him?
Well, think about this. The best leaders are dictatorial. So Churchill was dictatorial. And in fact, he disapproved of democracy. He thought democracy was deeply flawed. And he said, go and spend, if you want to be put off democracy, go and spend 15 minutes talking with the average voter. Margaret Thatcher, she was dictatorial, and she actually viewed most of her cabinet as idiots. But then she got things done. Donald Trump, he wants to be the CEO of America, and he behaves like it, but he actually does try and get things done.
And it's interesting, because Argentina went into the Falklands when Margaret Thatcher was in, and you think she was she'd be one of the last person you'd actually want to go and take on. And in some ways, did they go and take her on because they thought she was a woman? And that was the time they actually chose, because one, she had so much to prove, but one, she had this, she'd already been given the title by the Russian media as called the Iron Lady. And if you've ever done one of those Kersey temperament sorters, she's what's known as a rational field marshal.
And she was identity, wasn't she? She is proud to be British, Great Britain.
And the thing is, you see, we're so...
Same as Churchill.
And you say we complain about nationalism, yet in November we have a nationalistic day. We have, Remembrance Sunday. And if you actually look at how Remembrance Sunday actually works and how proud we are to be British on that one day, that wasn't about being global, it was about being nationalistic.
So how would you summarise today?
Sorry?
How would you summarise today?
How would I summarise today? Go on.
So we've talked about the importance of having a clear identity, without which people don't know how to behave. It really is as simple as that. Without clear identity and leadership, then people don't know how to behave. Things will become increasingly chaotic. People will become more anxious, more depressed, and it's up to the government to improve things, and they're not in a state to do that, as they've proven with Brexit.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to leave it there until next week. We'll speak to you soon. Have a
Thanks
good day.
for listening.
We'd love to hear comments. Bye-bye.